Hello, this is Kim Ki-hyun from Richgo. Now that we've passed the beginning of February, we're heading towards the middle. Let's check the current real estate market trends with data. First, I took a look at the data. The real estate market supply and demand in Seoul, especially in the Gangnam area, seems to be improving quite a bit. Also, due to the lifting of the land transaction permit system, what's happening? The market for high-priced apartments in Gangnam and Seoul is currently seeing an increase in value. It's improving again. These kinds of stories are emerging. Let's fact-check this with actual data. Now, here is the supply-demand index for sales and leases, including the most recent data, released up to early February. Let's take a look at Seoul first. As you can see, the blue line represents sellers and the number of sellers is decreasing, while the red line representing buyers is currently rising, right? Meanwhile, this bar graph shows that the supply-demand trend is improving. I mentioned these aspects in advance through the data, didn't I? Right. The first half of 2025 might not be so bad. In some areas, prices might even rise. However, the second half will be very risky. That's a forecast I have made. The current real estate market is likely to be very similar to 2022. It is also likely to be very similar to 2008. That's what I'm saying. I will provide the basis for this shortly. Now, as you can see, the supply and demand in Seoul is slightly improving at the beginning of the year. Now let's break down Seoul further into Gangnam and Gangbuk. As you can see, here is Gangnam. So there are 11 districts in Gangnam. As you can see, it's improving significantly. Thus, both sales and rental demand are currently rising sharply, while in Gangbuk, only the sales demand is improving at the moment. Now let's take a look at where there are more significant changes in the local real estate market. First, let's take a look at Gyeonggi-do. Gyeonggi-do has actually gotten worse, hasn't it? The rental market has slightly improved, but the sales market in Gyeonggi-do has actually worsened. In the case of Incheon, it has also gotten worse. The same goes for the rental market. Then, in the metropolitan area, it seems that only Seoul is improving at the moment, as we can confirm. And notably, Daegu's rental supply has finally reached almost 100, as I mentioned before. Right. I don't know exactly when this year, but I'm thinking around the end of the year or fall, one of the markets that will definitely improve. From that point, where did I say it would be? It's Daegu. So what is the prerequisite sign for Daegu to improve? The rental supply must exceed 100, but it's almost around 100 now, right? So Daegu had an oversupply. But now the supply is significantly decreasing, and therefore the rental supply in Daegu will continue to improve. As the rental supply, in Daegu rises to around 120 or 130, I think it will likely have a significantly positive impact on the sales prices in Daegu. And as I mentioned in a recent video, by 2025, rather than talking about negative stories or declines, I want to talk much more about seizing the tremendous opportunities that are coming. And a significant number of those areas are, for the most part, in the provinces. Regardless of whether the future economic situation worsens or improves, many opportunities are visible in the provinces and I plan to visit these provincial areas. I am considering giving lectures that can invigorate the real estate market in these provincial areas. If any of you watching this video are from the provinces, please leave a comment and invite me to your town. I will read your comments and take them into consideration. So, Daegu is expected to improve in the future, and I am considering visiting Daegu sometime this year. Sejong is still sluggish. The situation remains sluggish. In the case of Busan, the supply is decreasing in the short term. So as you have seen, the rental market in Busan is significantly improving. And as a result, the sales prices in Busan may turn slightly positive in the future. However, the important thing is that in Daegu and Busan, there are too many redevelopment and reconstruction projects underway, so there is a very high possibility that the supply will increase significantly again. Therefore, while Busan may be favorable in the short term, it might not be so easy in the medium to long term. I think I can say that. So we have now looked at some of the most noticeable areas. Now let's take a look at the transaction trends. While supply and demand are important, it's crucial to see if transactions are keeping up with the actual supply and demand. So let's take a look at how the transactions are doing. First, let's look at Seoul. Looking at Seoul, the sales and lease transactions have slightly increased, right? So, With both supply and demand improving and transactions also getting better, it seems that Seoul's situation might improve in the short term. But doesn't this situation seem just like when the same phenomenon occurred in the first half of 2022 and the first half of 2008? However, as we move into the second half of the year, there is a high possibility that the market situation will rapidly deteriorate, especially with the third phase of the stress DSR scheduled for July 2025. Therefore, it is expected that the demand will significantly decrease as the loan limits are further reduced due to these factors. So, in Seoul, transactions are currently being supported as much as the supply and demand. Now, let's take a look at Incheon. In Incheon, transactions have actually decreased. So the market in Incheon is not very good? It's still not very good. Now let's look at Gyeonggi-do, which has slightly increased, right? So both sales and jeonse prices have increased very slightly. Overall, NNO in the metropolitan area, Seoul is the best, followed by Gyeonggi-do, and then Incheon. Incheon seems to have the weakest energy for now. And in the case of Ulsan, which I view positively in the medium to long term, sales transactions have been increasing again recently. Now, in the case of Gyeongnam, jeonse transactions are currently increasing significantly. Jeonse transactions are the most active right now. It's at the top. So, Gyeongnam is also one of the few regions that are expected to perform well in the future. However, despite this, the figures are between 20 and 30, so historically, transactions are currently very low in most regions nationwide. Now, in addition to this, there seems to be some debate about whether prices are rising or falling recently. So let's fact check this with actual data. First, I'll show you using KB real estate statistics. Looking at it this way, from October 2024 to January 2025, Seoul and Gangnam are the hottest, marked in the brightest red. This area has increased the most. Next, Songpa, Yongsan, Songdong, Gwangjin, and Gangdong have also risen significantly, while Gwanak-gu, Jungnam-gu, Nowon-gu, and Dobong-gu are not so much. And there is not a single place where the jeonse prices have decreased. So if you look at the flower chart, it's currently moving like this. And in Gangnam and Sukyeon, both the sale and jeonse prices are still rising. Whereas in the case of Songpa-gu, it's dropping downwards. The jeonse price is showing a slight decline at the moment. Even when you look at the neighboring Gangdong-gu, both the sale and jeonse prices are showing a slight weakening. And in the case of Jongnam-gu, the sale prices are continuously declining. And in Gwanak-gu, both sale and jeonse prices are currently falling. This was observed using the weekly statistics data from KB Real Estate. So when you look at this, it still seems somewhat okay. However, while KB Real Estate provides excellent statistics, it has a slight drawback of being somewhat slow. So let's take a look using the faster index data from the Korea Real Estate Board. Now, even when you look at this, there are hardly any places where prices have dropped. But how about jeonse prices? For jeonse, there are quite a few places where prices have visibly decreased. In areas like Songpa, Gangdong, Dongdaemun-gu, and Guro-gu, jeonse prices have decreased, but there hasn't been a single place where sale prices have dropped since last October. Now, by looking at the flower chart, you can better understand the trend. Look, Nowon-gu is currently turning to the left, isn't it? Now, in Gangnam, Seocho-gu, and then Gangnam-gu, after weakening, they are now slightly turning back to an upward trend. In the case of Songpa-gu, jeonse prices showed some weakness in recent months, but now both jeonse and sale prices are rising again. This is the current situation I want to show. So, according to the statistical data from the Korea Real Estate Board, most areas are still showing a good upward trend. Now let's take a look at the actual transaction prices using the Richgo actual transaction price index created by Richgo. So, how does it look when you see it like this? Yongsan is the hottest, followed by Seocho and Gangnam, while many other areas are already seeing a significant influx of blue markers. So, the downward trend is spreading quite a bit in actual transaction prices. In the case of jeonse, long-term rental, areas like Songpa, Gwangjin, Dobong, Guro, Gumcheon, and Gwanak are currently declining, while Seocho, Gangnam, Gangseo-gu, Junggu, and Yongsan-gu are still rising hotly. This shows a slightly different picture compared to the statistics from KB or the Korea Real Estate Board. Now, if you look at this, moving to the right indicates an increase in sale prices, and Yongsan is still doing well, right? It's still okay. Now, in the case of Seocho-gu, it was rising, but based on actual transactions in January, it's currently declining. However, this data is compiled up to February 10th. So not all actual transactions from January have been fully accounted for yet. You should take these aspects into consideration when looking at this. Based on the data compiled up to February 10th, Seoul showed a weak performance in January. In the case of Mapo-gu, Jones prices are falling and sales prices were falling but are now rebounding. If you look at the chart, some areas are positioned on the right like this. So, in places like Seocho, Yongsan, Gangnam, Mapo, and Jongno, the sales prices are still rising. But in areas like Gangnam, Jongno, and Mapo, the prices are going down while Jeonse prices are falling. However, quite a lot of areas are on the left side. In other words, the sales prices are currently declining and are continuing to go down. Even the Jones prices are currently declining. Let's take a look at Songpa-gu. In the case of Songpa-gu, it's like this now, right? So the Jones prices have been declining for 2 consecutive months in December and January. And what about areas like Dongjak-gu, most of Gangseong-gu, and Jung-gu? In the case of Gangseong-gu, prices have been continuously dropping in November, December, and January, and even the Jeonse prices turned downward in January. So if you look at this, quite a few areas still have actual transaction prices like this in January. But the supply and demand situation is improving, isn't it? So this data might change it again. There were no transactions at the end of January, so it's around February. So it might turn around again then. But when looking at the data up to January, the situation is that quite a few areas in Seoul are actually declining in terms of actual transactions. Now, I will take a look at this on a national level. Not only in Seoul, but people in the provinces must also be eager for data, right? So, I will also show you the provinces. Now, if you look at the actual transaction prices from Richgo, there's only Jeonbuk on the right, isn't there? Only Jeonbuk. Mumbuk currently has stable sales and rental prices. In the case of Ulsan, it was rising, but has now turned to a decline. In the case of Seoul, overall, both sales and rental prices have been declining in December and January. In Daegu, both sales and rental prices are still falling, and Chungnam is also on a continuous downward trend. Incheon is also on a continuous downward trend. The place with the largest decline is Sejong, so the sales price in Sejong is on the far left. In other words, you can see it as the area where sales prices have dropped the most. And recently, rental prices have also started to decline. In the case of Jeju Island, only rental prices are currently rising. Sales prices are currently falling, so at a glance, almost all regions nationwide have been moving to the left. Since October, with many areas experiencing poor sales prices and further declines. Therefore, recently, the trend in rental prices has also not been good. However, in the first half of the year, it might improve a little again, but even so, I don't see a high possibility of a significant increase in transaction volume. And with the implementation of the stress DSR, after July, I expect there will be considerable concerns about the economy, along with a significant adjustment in the form of a decline. Going forward, I will continue to provide insights into the national real estate market situation based on data. I would appreciate your continued support. Thank you.